welcome once again. If you feel you've just had a feast, then that's great, but we have another feast in store for us just now. As we've already said a few times, we're celebrating the 125th anniversary of the formation of the first Baptist college in this country, and we thought today and tomorrow that as a part of the school we would offer what we're going to call collage, and essentially to do a bit of the storytelling. Today we'll have a particular focus, and tomorrow a different focus in these sessions. Back in the year 2000, the Melbourne College of Divinity, as it was, now the University of Divinity, held for its annual gathering with the ANZATS conference here in Melbourne, a focus on the future of theological education into this millennium. And I recall very clearly that in the opening keynote address, the remark was made by a visiting leader from the United States who had undertaken a very significant study of seminaries across many denominations, made the remark about the role of seminaries, colleges, as the vehicle, as the carrying vehicle of identity for the communities to which they belong. And it seems to me that this is not only a reality, but it is also a question and a challenge, which seems, I think, very appropriate for us in this context as we are thinking about whether there is indeed something that we can call Baptist identity and what is its character and so on. We should think a little about the role of a seminary or the role of a theological college in this entire process. So the first thing we're going to do just now is look at a short DVD which has been put together by Justin Park, our community relations manager, relating to the 125th, and then we're going to hear from three illustrious historians who sit before us. Dr. Rosamund Otzen wrote the centenary history of the college, which means it was nearly 26 years ago, and needs a few more chapters, Ros. Yes, and Ros has written a number of histories of Christian communities, Christian organisations here in this state and city, and local churches. She has served as the chair of the Whitley College Council over a period of time. Escaped from that a couple of years ago, and is such a good friend of the college, we thought immediately of asking her to offer some perspectives on this story. Professor Marita Munro, she is the first person to hold the role of a professor of Baptist studies in history of this college and indeed in this country. And Marita has the distinction of having begun her theological studies here at Whitley. She was the first woman to be ordained to the Baptist pastoral ministry in this country. Go for it! And has now served with us on the faculty for some time. She's going to reflect on her own time in the changing character of the Baptist community over that time. And our distinguished Professor Ken Manley, former principal of this college, is going to offer us his own perspectives as well. And we're going to go in that sequence as to what they have to offer. So just briefly to say that we will have 3 presentations, and then again we will have the time to respond in this session. But first, Justin is going to finish this DVD. And there are parts of it that you're allowed to laugh at.
College with dreams. Dreams of converting the world. When I first went to my first church, people regard ministers as people who have all the answers. But in actual fact, we're all on a journey. We're at different stages of that journey. And that's been a help to me because my college years were a journey. And I've never stopped travelling. I've never stopped learning.
The college meant a lot in my life. It was very important to me. I learned a lot, but I wished it had been a higher level of education and those covered practical matters a lot better.
Whitley College has been basic for me because it was a place I wanted to go to. I had to go to because the nomination said that people to go to. So I wanted to go there. And I wanted to go there, and it became a place where I was formed as a Baptist minister and given understanding of how Baptists work, how Baptists govern, and how they contribute to the life of the community.
It's 125 years since Reverend William Whitley first gathered a group of students in a room of the Collins Street Baptist Church in 1891, thus beginning the life of the Baptist College, the first such college in Australia. Before this time, Australian Baptists had a vision for locally trained leaders. The Baptist community of Victoria dreamed of a college where young Australians could be trained for service in the churches of the growing nation.
In 1912, the college moved from Collins Street Baptist Church to Errol Street, North Melbourne. In 1965, a new college was opened as the residential college of the University of Melbourne, and theological college with the name Whitley College, the Baptist College of Victoria. In this college, ministry students lived and studied with people preparing for other professions and learned to relate their faith to the challenges of the modern world.
In 1972, Whitley College was the first of the colleges of Melbourne University to become co-educational. Shortly after, the first female students were admitted to the theological school, and in 1977, Marita Munro became the first woman Baptist ministry in Australia.
From 1974 onwards, a growing number of people began to study theology, but without the intention of being ordained. In a short time, students studying towards ordination were just 10% of those studying at the college. Most were studying theology in order to serve more effectively in their existing professions and in their local churches.
In 1989, a new Centre for Theological Studies, the Mervyn Kimberley Theological Studies Centre, was opened. In 2003, Whitley College and the Baptist Union of Victoria Multicultural Ministry Task Force launched the Transformation Program, a Christian leadership training program for people of a non-English speaking background.
I met many of church leaders at Transformation course from different background and different culture. I also met many scholars at master degree, supervisor, mentor, advisor. That helped me a lot for my pastor role.
Over the years, Whitley College has had a very important part to play in the life of the local church. It's provided an opportunity for a range of experiences in study, both for those who are being prepared for pastoral leadership, as well as others who are seeking to do some theological study.
Whitley College is important because it is the place where we hold our history, and it provides a storytelling function back to the local church to help it to understand who it is in the larger context of the life and history of the church.
From humble beginnings in rooms at Collins Street Baptist Church, The college has since served the church, the community and the world well, offering education, training and formation for an increasingly diverse community of people.
It's such a privilege to celebrate the life of the Baptist College of Victoria, now 125 years, and to recognise the immense contribution of those who have gone before. Principals Whitley, Holdsworth, Grigg, Himbry, Manley and Pound, and all their faculty members, every one of them passionate for the gospel and committed to raise up people who are alive in faith and hope and love, servants of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's the heritage and the shape of our college today. In a very different world, we have a multiplicity of programs and forms of study for people who are school leavers, right through to those doing doctoral degrees, and at the centre, the training of pastors for our churches. With all this change and diversity, we have to find new ways of building community and working on what is most central, the formation of Christian faith and character.
Whitley College continues to operate as a theological school with a strong reputation for its academic focus relating to Christian faith.
Personally, I am so grateful for all that the college has meant for me. As a boy from the country coming to university, then in my training to be a pastor, and now having the privilege of leading this world-class team of teachers. There is nothing that gives me more delight than to see a person come alive to the deep meaning of their faith, to see God at work in their lives, and to see them grow into more effective witness to the presence and reality of God in our world today.
History reflects a deep commitment to the Scriptures, a resolute determination to grapple with the shifts and trends in the wider culture, and an ongoing passion for shaping leaders who in turn will shape the world in ways which reflect the ministry and call of Jesus. Teachers and students alike are grounded in ministry contexts which inform the questions which are asked and encourage bold exploration of what God is calling the church to be. The dream of Whitley College has been an evolving one, though grounded in this one commitment to serve the church by preparing God's people for mission in the world. Our prayer is that Whitley College will continue in this tradition as it has for 125 years.
Thank you so much, Justin. Well, I'm not going to say anything more, but rather to invite Dr. Ros Otzen to speak to us now about some more of the story. Thank you, Ros.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to see you all here and to be here. Marita said to me, we probably don't need to say anything now. Thank you. Now, I just retitled my paper. I retitled it 10 minutes ago to Then Is Now. And that's because the three intertwined themes that I'm going to look at are still intertwined and are still the ongoing themes that mark out the life of the college. The first theme is, what should theological education be? The second, how are we to pay for it? And the third, where will we do it? So, our earliest Baptist preachers in Melbourne were really unlettered men, but full of enthusiasm, a bit cranky at times, but they were earnest in the pulpit, and they were convicted and convinced in every possible way. But they wanted ordained pastors to lead them ultimately, and they looked to England. Where else? England, England, England. And a succession of well-educated and ordained men began to trickle into the colony. Collins Street Baptist called the Reverend James Taylor in 1860, and he immediately set up a pastor's class, 2 nights a week in the Collins Street vestry. Besides that vestry scene, he included laymen as well as ministerial applicants, and his classes served the missionary aims of the New Baptist Association to open new churches in Melbourne and to produce deacons as well as ministers for them. In Monglart's words, they were evangelical and conservative, pietistic and Calvinistic. Taylor was briefly followed by Reverend Thomas Ness, trained at Spurgeon's College. He thought big, he wanted a national college. Unfortunately, he only lasted a year or so. But he and the Reverend James Moss taught Latin, Greek, logic, systematic theology, English and homiletics. This is the first time in the state that Baptists had access to those studies. But having received no support at all from anybody, this just fizzled out. It's Collins Street again. Following Reverend James Taylor, the church called Reverend James Martin in 1869. He was a very well-educated man, a degree from London University and trained at Stepney College. And this was quickly understood and recognised and valued in Melbourne, for he was invited to teach at the Congregational Theological College. They got ahead of us in 1869. And in the next 20 or so years, 7 Baptist ministers graduated from the Congregational Theological College. Martin was also instrumental in establishing the Victorian Baptist Home Mission Society in 1871. Unfortunately, he died only a few years later and was, his work was shortened in that way. But the denomination was very comfortable with the Congregational College at this stage, and so they could see no reason to rush to replace him with a Baptist college or specifically Baptist training until the moment that the Congregationalists raised their entrance standards. They wanted matriculation, the equivalent of Year 12, and 2 years of an arts course at a university. Well, most Baptist students were ill-educated and failed to qualify by a mile. The question was then clearly in front of the Baptists. Should Baptist ministry consist of well-educated men or just enthusiasts? A genuine division split Victorian Baptists too at this time about belief. And I was just thinking as we were singing the first song, Kim Fabricius' song from 2015, where God with a bang the earth inflated. How the horror that this would have been greeted with by the Baptists in the 1860s. Even though groundbreaking studies, Darwin, creationism, beginning a long fight with modern science, and also the groundbreaking study of the origins of biblical texts, true textual study, which showed a completely different story about how the Bible had been put together. Was it going to be hold the line at all costs, or develop a theological accommodation for the radical changes in knowledge and society? Thus was created a conundrum which has repeated itself time and again since then. How educated should a minister be? Is it necessary to study widely, to learn languages, to study at a university, to follow developments in contemporary theology, or indeed to create it? Is learning good or bad for faith? Well, the Congregationists were not going to educate our ministry, so where would the next Baptist pastors come from? The movers and shakers who sought an answer to this question were educated clergy like Collins Street's Reverend Samuel Chapman, and laymen like Collins Street's William McLean. The Baptist College was finally begun in 1891 by men like these seeking the most modern, state-of-the-art developments in ministerial education. They were assisted at the time by the presence of Dr. Alexander McLaren, a very powerful and notably well-connected Baptist from Manchester. And he opined, whatever else you neglect, see that you do not starve your education for the ministry. But how could this be afforded? We didn't have a penny. Enter the Victorian Baptist Fund. An anonymous donor offered to give £25,000 to the denomination if churches raised a matching amount in 5 years. Bless them, they did. It was a moment of fervour and excitement and incredible effort, and £50,000 plus was raised. It was agreed that a portion of the fund was to go to clerical education. Reverend Sam Chapman from CSBC drove the foundation of the college. He proposed the Reverend William Whitley as its first principal. Whitley was Rawdon trained in Yorkshire, like Chapman himself, and with another degree from no less a university than Cambridge. McLaren was the go-between. Chapman became chair of the fund and chair of the college, almost for life, and had the support of a whole battery of well-educated laymen like William McLean. The college under Whitley was clearly in the highly educated camp. Whitley himself was a persistent scholar, and you've heard Frank speak of his amazing PhD on Australian Federation, and Ken will speak more about Whitley later. Again, earnest young men, though, found themselves unable to meet the academic and educational requirements the college now required, and few were applying for entry, even from other states, because this was a college that made itself available to anybody. Again, classes were held in the CSBC vestry, and from 1895, Whitley developed a sharing arrangement, an ecumenical arrangement for ministerial education with Sugden at Queen's College. Yes, the dreaded Methodists. But they were okay. The problem of securing well-educated ministerial candidates came to a head when in 1899 no new applicants came to the college. The college committee lost its nerve. By that stage Sam Chapman was gone, I think, and they required Whitley to resign. A very sad ending. Nevertheless, the college limped on in the vestry, with another Rawdon scholar at the helm from 1902, the Reverend W.H. Holdsworth. But he won the battle for more rather than less education for students. Wisely, he began a preliminary year to bring candidates up to educational scratch before they began their serious theological studies. Holdsworth was one of the founders of the College of Divinity, now the University of Divinity, and he insisted on the study of higher criticism, as it was known then, modern theological studies and insights. This was a severe disappointment to many Baptists, who argued that a man might be highly educated, but a flop at winning souls, and good only for flowery addresses. Reverend F.W. Wilkin, the first Australian-trained minister to teach at the college, sat neatly on the theological fence. Despite having an MA from the University of Melbourne and valuing a deeply educated ministry, he also lauded those large-hearted, earnest, gracious men who did not or could not attend the university. He didn't actually mention the small-hearted, ungracious men who were also preaching at the time. Anyhow, whatever, he said, whatever our students may be as scholars, I pray that they may be wise to win souls. So the evangelicals felt that they had a voice in Wilkin. All the same, in the 1920s, Baptist pastors, many of them, were suspicious of the alleged lack of Bible teaching in the college. The problem of where the college should be located was solved by another benevolence like that of the trust, the fund. In 1911, Mrs. Trestrail bequeathed 3 two-storey elegant houses in Errol Street, not far from the university, and you saw a lovely photograph of them before they were demolished. And the college moved in 1912. The uneasy theological situation continued bubbling along, but came to a head when Holdsworth's successor was sought as the next college principal. The Reverend Donovan Mitchell, Professor of Theology at the college, was regarded by Holdsworth and Wilkin as the obvious next principal. He had completed his BD with the College of Divinity and was a thoroughly modern theologian who supported higher criticism, and he was an inspiring teacher as well. The College Council confidently submitted his name to the Union Council for acceptance. Now, so far, all leadership of the college had come from England. Donovan was Australian, but he wasn't Victorian. A significant group of church representatives instead favoured a Victorian man, the Reverend J.E. Newnham, also an MA and a BD, and put him forward as principal. He was local, he was popular, he wasn't a strong advocate for higher criticism, although he was not inimical to it. Now, at this point, there was an extraordinary interference in the selection process from an interdenominational magazine, not even a Baptist magazine, an interdenominational magazine called The Edifier, which launched a strong attack on Mitchell and higher learning. Let a united voice be raised, they thundered, to ensure that only a man loyal to the evangelical faith and teaching shall be appointed. It was impossible then for the council to select either man after this mischievous partisanship. So Mitchell left the state and the denomination, and other Baptist ministers also gave up from the Baptist Church and left. After a sort of moment to gather its breath, the college chose a New Zealander. Surely nobody could object. Closer to home, but nobody knew the man, and he was perfectly suitable in other respects. So in 1939, the Reverend A.J. Grigg, after whom this lecture theatre is named, M.A., B.D., was appointed principal. Poor Reverend Grigg, he had to deal not only with the difficulties in the Baptist Union, but he had to deal with the war, the drop in numbers of students because of the war, financial strictures of a dreadful sort, and his own ongoing ill health. In 1941, the curriculum was revised, not by Principal Grigg or his faculty, but by an advisory subcommittee. But as far as some Baptists were concerned, the wrong people were on that committee because it retained a sophisticated intellectual bent. You did a 4-year course. You followed the LTH of the College of Divinity for 3 years, and you did 2 university subjects for breadth, such as history and psychology, and you received tutorial support from the college. What differed, though, was that on graduation, an apprenticeship of 4 years in a home mission church was required of each newly ordained minister. The program was directed by Newnham. Although Grigg did not introduce evangelism as a study, as many wished, there was a greater emphasis on practical evangelism and preaching during this period. It was an important détente that the college had reached, and a necessary one, because we needed ministers. A quarter of all Baptist churches post-war were new. Here's a quote from me. Grigg understood that although they could be fired up to establish mission and evangelical schemes, Baptists invariably chose educated men to hold leadership and administrative positions in the denomination, whether ministerial or lay, and that continues. Post-war, in 1951, the college had to abandon its insistence on only unmarried men. as students. But a push for women to be accepted was diverted into the creation of the Baptist Training Institute for Deaconesses in 1946. The women were allowed to attend some theological lectures. All the same, there seemed to be a steady whittling away at this time of higher educative study. In 1953, the educational standard for entry to the college was reduced to the Leaving Certificate, Year 11, and the requirement of a pass in Greek was dropped completely. Greek was still studied for 4 years in college, but students like J.G. Manning refused to study Greek. He saw it as a waste of time. So he didn't actually graduate because he was units short. He failed. Yes, he failed. There we are. He was a lion of the whole mission movement though. By now, financial starvation was biting. There was a terrible shortage of money post-war. Buildings were shabby, the lovely Errol Street buildings, very tired. Salaries were very low. The college was grossly understaffed. The library got £50 a year to buy new books. The income was less than £2,500 a year, of which £1,400 came from the fund. Food from church harvest festivals was brought in to feed the students. The college again rejected a plan for evangelism to become a subject, again confirming the views of some that the college was in some way anti-Christian, especially given the massive evangelism of the American sort in Victoria in the 50s. And Billy Graham in 1959 was just one of many visiting evangelicals, like Pearly Gates and people with odd names like that. Yes, Paul Roberts, yes. It would seem that the forces of deep education were in retreat. But from 1951, the college began accepting for residents non-theological university students who were the sons of Baptists. Thus, when the Menzies government scheme to fund universities and their colleges was developed, a case could be made for a closer link with the University of Melbourne. We had University of Melbourne students in our college. In 1957, the Royal Parade block was bought for £26,000 and a bit, and the new college was built and opened in 1965. It was to be a residence for theological students, but also for non-theological university students as well. Both the availability of government money and the vision for the new college stirred and inspired Baptists all over again to give generously to the building fund. It was just like the Victorian Fund. Somebody offered money if we could raise more. Here the government was offering money. If we could raise more, we could build. Now, accepting state aid had long been anathema, but times had changed. The new format and the buildings irrevocably then connected the college to the university, and university standards prevailed. Matriculants now, Year 12 graduates, were the only ones accepted. University status, said the College Council, university status would enable Baptists to make a distinctive witness within the university and thus extend our influence throughout the cultural life of the state. That wasn't just rhetoric. Having influence inside the university meant to get into the heartland of the establishment, of the ideas factory, of the future leadership of the state. Very important. However, we also needed £7,000 per annum to run a new college, and we didn't have that income. Enter the Sanham bequest. The Sanham bequest gave $8,000 per annum, enough to run the college. And then the Crockett family. They left almost $700,000 to the college as well for theological use. This enabled, was that supposed to be pounds? Pounds. £700,000, I've used the wrong thing. Theological use. This enabled the purchase of the block and this building here, 50 The Avenue, in 1968 to establish the teaching place for the theological courses. An attempt to build a women's wing was thwarted. The issue for women's students was resolved, as you saw, when the co-educational residency came in 72, and Marita is the first Baptist woman ordained in Australia and graduated from college. Our next principal, Reverend Mervyn Himbrey, MA, BD, B Lit, from South Wales Theological College, the then principal, declared, "Today," I wish I could do his wonderful rumbling Welsh basso profundo, but I can't. "Today, wherever there are Baptists, there are also colleges, so that the purity of the faith may be upheld and the increasing store of human knowledge brought to bear upon the witness of the Church." The new college was named for Whitley, and a university college style staff and structure was adopted: professors, deans, tutorials and so forth. This fuelled further angst amongst those who feared the influence of secular study on the purity of the faith. Himbrey added pastoral training, however, to the theological curriculum to better fit pastors for the practicalities of ministry. Now, I'm not going to bring us very much more slowly to the present day, I will be here forever, but Himbrey's successors, Reverend Ken Manley from 1987 to 2000, the Reverend Jeff Pound 2000 to 2006, and Reverend Frank Rees from 06 to the present, have themselves ridden the tides of support and opposition, as have all the principals before them. One of the great and extraordinary changes which has occurred since the 1970s is the huge rise in the number of people wanting to attend college, particularly lay people taking theological studies. In 1974, there were 24 students in all doing theological studies. By 2016, there are 300 students, of whom 25 to 30 are undertaking ordination studies, and this cohort has remained very strong in the last 5 to 10 years. There are around 80 in transformation doing their diplomas, 40 or so in NEXT, or the Camp Wilkin program for young leaders, and about 120 others taking degree subjects across a range of programs. And of very real and fantastic significance, 30 or more are undertaking research degrees, mostly doctorates. We're talking about higher education here. Whitley is the largest provider of research degrees in the University of Divinity of all the churches. In addition, from this year, the college has joined with Wellspring, and that's the area of spirituality that Paul was speaking to us about this morning, where an additional 40 or more students undertake degree units in the areas of spirituality. There is now an increasingly theologically well-educated Baptist laity, but there is still the same distrust and active voicing of it from some churches. Still attacks on particular members of the faculty who are suspect: Athol Gill in the 70s and 80s, Keith Dyer in the 1990s and 2000s, whose reappointments to their professorships required the acceptance of the assembly, and who suffered the censoriousness and attacks of some churches before their reappointments were endorsed. The college has survived as a place of higher learning and effective Christian education. It continues to educate men and women seeking ordination and lay people. It continues to suffer unreasoning and at times somewhat vindictive and self-righteous attacks for these very achievements. I am told, though, that all such colleges and seminaries worldwide suffer much the same difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you, Roz, for setting the scene so beautifully and giving us a wonderful overview. I came to Whitley College in 1975. I was a young 21-year-old from the Manley Baptist Church in Queensland, excited at the prospect of study and future ministry. I moved into the college, a residence for the university, as you have heard, with a handful of single male theologues. Frank and Marilyn Rees were residents, as Frank was completing his BD and studying for his Dip Ed at the university. My BA studies at the University of Queensland had included some theological units, and these had whetted my appetite for more. And my involvement in a radical discipleship, or we might say emerging church or missional community in Brisbane, the House of Freedom, had introduced me to some new mission, biblical and theological insights under the leadership of Athol Gill. These were exciting days for a 21-year-old. I got on the tram outside the college and discovered that I couldn't hear English being spoken. I was in a very multicultural city. I joined a group of mainly male theological students, including graduates and undergraduates. Several of us were not yet ordination candidates, but dipping our toes in the water, all Baptists, of course. The undergraduate degree, the Bachelor of Theology, was some years away. So graduates, like myself, were studying the BD, a set curriculum, totally exam-based. No essays that really counted for anything. And undergraduates were enrolled in the LTH or the Dip Theol or the Dip RE, and some of you may remember those qualifications. My studies began with a 2-week Greek intensive in February. It was beautiful. Autumn, Melbourne, lovely. About 12 men, 2 women, including a deaconess, Marion Welford, and myself. All Anglo-Saxon. Greek formed a large part of the curriculum, which suited me very well, as I always enjoyed languages, and I would go on to complete a New Testament major in my BD, but I did discover that it was not to everybody's liking. One of the 2 full-time faculty members at the time, Professor Basil Brown, was our Professor of Biblical Studies. He taught Hebrew, Greek, and New Testament, and in an earlier time he had taught church history. A demanding taskmaster, he carried a heavy load at times when the college was between principals. Clary Edwards, the Reverend Clary Edwards, taught Greek grammar, and we enjoyed his excellent teaching style, good humour and engaging manner. Classroom space was limited. We met in a noisy, uncarpeted, uncurtained room adjacent to the chapel. We could see out and the world could see in, which is a good perspective for doing theology. The air was punctuated by phones ringing at the bottom of the stairwells because rooms did not have their own phones, and this was pre-mobile phone era. Residential students with healthy lungs summoned the required person to the phone while risking buckets of water being poured on them while standing at the bottom of the stairwell. Traffic accidents outside the college were regular occurrences, and there was often a bevy of tow trucks lined up in Royal Parade to provide distraction for those who were not quite so vitally interested in Greek grammar. Living in a residential college with University of Melbourne students was a challenge to a neophyte like myself. Did they ever sleep, I wondered. I knew nothing about AFL, despite living across the road from the home of Carlton. Theologues, or logs as we were called, who participated in inter-college sport tended to gain a greater degree of acceptance. Chapel services doubled as preaching class. Male voices dominated the singing in the chapel. The organ was installed early in my time at the college, a wonderful innovation. Sermon classes could be decidedly daunting, however, as after each service and sermon, the conduct of the worship service and the sermon were dissected by the 3 faculty members. It was a case of sink or swim, and not an experience for the faint-hearted. Yet I learned a lot about the leadership of worship. and the craft of preaching. Principal Himry was a remarkable person. I had never heard oratory like his. The way he preached, broke bread at the communion table, and prayed had me spellbound. He was a very fine historian, proud of the nonconformist Baptist heritage, painting big themes on a big canvas. He also had a great heart for the residential students, the great unwashed, as he referred to them. And they loved him as well. He saw them as a mission ground. Visiting preachers could inspire and challenge, like the Southern Baptist preacher who had come to deliver us all from the theology of the New Testament scholar Rudolf Bultmann, and question my sense of call to ministry on the basis of his understanding of the interpretation and authority of Scripture. If lecture notes were issued, they were prepared on a spirit duplicator, light purple ink that faded over time. This was followed by the use of stencils used on a rodeo machine oozing black ink for the uninitiated, all well before the era of photocopying and scanning. There was no fee help for theological study. Students survived by doing part-time work, as I suspect they still do, or by partners, and this meant wives, supporting their husbands while they were studying. I'll always be grateful to the North Carlton Baptist Church, who paid me a comparatively princely sum for preaching there on Sunday nights. Early highlights for me as a student included inspirational lectures from a busy adjunct teaching staff, pastors like Graham Garrett from the Box Hill Church and Terry Fowler, whose lectures on the Word of God and the prophets were wonderful. Graham suffered a major heart attack in his first year, and this was a bitter blow. I enjoyed Frank Rees's tutorials on Hans Kung's book, The Church, even though I wasn't much of a systematic theologian. I enjoyed the discussion of ethical issues with the Dean of the Melbourne College of Divinity, John Henley, an ethicist, and I remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail and the conversation we had about that at the time. The lecture by Reverend Noel Vose on Anabaptists really piqued my interest in that wonderful movement. And schools of ministry were just beginning. These were great events. They did go for 5 days, Monday to Friday. I lapped up the content. Outstanding included the lectures by Torvald Lorenzen on the parables of Jesus, and by David Russell, British Baptist leader, on the meaning of shalom. And I reckon I got about 5 sermons out of each of those, which was great. I had the opportunity to tutor in New Testament Greek, and I appreciated the interest and support of the faculty. They became my friends. When the Whitlam Labor government abolished tertiary fees in the early 70s, the floodgates opened, and for the first time students from non-privileged backgrounds could enter university if their matriculation results were strong enough. And this meant the introduction too of the Bachelor of Theology towards the end of my time as an undergraduate, or a graduate actually, and the cooperative arrangement with the Churches of Christ, with the establishment of the ETA, the Evangelical Theological Association. This Bachelor of Theology degree, introduced by the Melbourne College of Divinity, meant that a whole lot of people could now study. They didn't have to be graduates, and they could study in a degree program. And the Bachelor of Theology lent itself to much greater diversity. It was a much more interesting degree than the BD or the other LTH, Dip Theol. And that meant that more practical, pastoral, missiological units could now be offered. Victorian Baptists, when I was a student, were also undergoing significant challenge about future directions that related to questions of vision, ministry and resources. There were struggling congregations all over the city, in the inner city, in the northern suburbs, in the western suburbs, for the growth corridor was in the east. And a series of commissions was held during the 1970s. Would you believe a commission into the ministry? A review of ministry and its role. A commission into the western suburbs. Ross Manley was the Western Suburbs Commissioner. A commission into the ordination of women. And the Victorian Baptist General Council accepted its first woman ordination candidate in 1976. The interview process was a bit formidable, but there were only 2 interviews, so it wasn't too bad. But when I went to the first gathering, General Council meeting, held on Friday nights at Kew Baptist, I had to answer questions about the authority and inspiration of Scripture. The decision of Victorian Baptists to ordain women prompted a challenge from a group within the Union, the Baptist Revival Fellowship, and that led to the establishment of another study commission. And it concluded that there were no bars to the ordination of women. And so gradually, a trickle of women would come through. There were many women studying in the college by now with the Bachelor of Theology, but only a very small minority would proceed to ordination. I'll just move on, just to think about when I was appointed to the college. Sorry, my notes have come out. I'd been a tutor throughout the late 70s and for much of the 80s, and in 1992 I was invited to join the faculty of the ETA to support Ken Manley's teaching in church history, and I continued to teach New Testament Greek. The college had grown like Topsy, burgeoning enrolments, new buildings, establishment of the School of World Mission, a more ecumenical student community with new offerings. The Reverend Meryl Kitchen, a strong and gifted woman leader and New Testament scholar, was the Dean of the ETA, later to become Principal of the Churches of Christ College. The second week of my first semester, as a member of faculty, Athol Gill, Professor of New Testament, suffered a major heart attack at his desk and died, sending shockwaves through the college and the union. And so followed interim arrangements until Keith Dyer was appointed some 3 years later. I remember tutorials overflowing with new arrivals from the People's Republic of China from the early 90s following Tiananmen Square. The development of the ordination program with the appointment of other faculty, Alan Maher, Jill Manton, Jeff Pound, Colin Hunter, introducing those wonderful units that I had not experienced and I had missed, like spiritual formation and STFE, and a more formal homiletics class, and a more formal Baptist history and theology class. We welcome greater diversity onto the teaching faculty as well as the student body, more women, more teachers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And programs such as Transformation have been a great joy. Exposure to international scholars and practitioners through the schools of ministry, the School of World Mission, Scholars in Residence programs and so on has been a wonderful experience and opportunity for me to learn from others. Perhaps the most recent challenges for someone who is a bit like an old dog now, and it can be a bit hard to teach an old dog new tricks. New pedagogical challenges and opportunities in the last decade or so. Many more theological qualifications. The BThol is no longer the main game. New degrees, diplomas, advanced diplomas. Flexible delivery, the internet revolution, live streaming, online tutorials, teaching online, all of these things bringing great challenges and opportunities. And there are many providers out there in the marketplace now, in a way that there was once not the case. Let me conclude my segment by just quoting the words of a verse in the College hymn written by Ross Manley. I think it's the second verse of the hymn. He says, "Looking back, we praise your name for those who saw and heard. May we see more light and truth break forth, become your word. Help us stir up your church, sound out the call, turning others to walk with our God, to righteousness and justice, to follow the Spirit into joy, exploring the way ahead together." Thank you.
Well, I thank my colleagues for helping us remember some aspects of the college's history. They have rebuffed what has been called the inadvertently hyper-Calvinist words of Henry Ford, that history is one damn thing after another. A good history of an institution is like a good biography. It can help us look at both the more particular and the more general. And I'm grateful that Roz is here for us to say that that's exactly what she did for us in the history that she wrote all those years ago. And like Frank, I look forward to the sequel volume very soon. My particular challenge is to invite you to explore the ways in which being a Baptist college has been shaped by the denomination here in Victoria, and to explore the question of how Whitley has contributed not only to Victorian but to Australian and indeed world Baptist life. I'm going to reduce, I think, myself to headings, and with Frank's permission I'll make a copy available if anybody would like it. My suggestion is that we might, and I'm not a scientist, I tread very carefully here, to suggest that the relation between Whitley and BUV is a kind of symbiosis, a living together of two different biological species. The word is also used of two species becoming entirely dependent on each other for survival. And that's partly true, I think. So I want just to remind you of the obvious, that the college was created in response to what faithful people, Baptist people, believed was a call from God, as Ross has reminded you. And the college has in turn been committed to help gifted persons prepare for pastoral and missionary service, and this relationship is vital to both of us. The wider Baptist churches which created the college, and in a way for whom the college exists, though it reaches far beyond that, but also for the college. I haven't read the book, but I saw a summary and an interesting review. A book by David Rees called In Praise of Forgetting, Historical Memory and Its Ironies. Rees was a reporter in the Bosnian War in the 1990s, and he became vividly aware of how historical memory can be used to justify war and violence. What the Irish writer Hubert Butler called the sores of history remain unhealed, many of them, and I'm suggesting that the college might also need to think about any of the sores of history that might still be hurting us. What Rees called the cult of memory can lead to history doing more harm than good. Now, it might be some of you who know me a little alarmed that I should speak in this way, but he's got a very important point. He recalls George Santayana's observation that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But he insists that it's also true that many who know history can commit horrible mistakes. The sort of thing he's picked up, you perhaps know Claire Wright, the historian here in Melbourne, who's picked up this idea and commented about Remembrance Day and Anzac Day. And she says, what if we had a forgetting day? Because she wants to stress the distinction between what we choose to remember and what we forget. Her book, you may know, is The Forgotten Rebels of Eureka, in which she traces the role of women in that important event. And she shows how history can be highly selective in what is remembered. You perhaps know Henry Reynolds' book, The Forgotten War, in which he shows that our fearful frontier wars were waged, though they've been long forgotten by our nation. Now, as Baptists, we have our remembrance days. I'm just tentatively asking whether we should have some forgetting days. There's the beginning of the Baptist movement 400 years ago. The celebration of special milestones for the Union or the College, as we are noting this year. Local churches have their anniversaries. The Baptist World Body had remarkable celebrations back in 2005 as it marked its centenary. They all prompt memorial histories. But the question is, what have we forgotten, or perhaps what we should forget? To take a recent painful case, says he, now retired and aged and can say anything. There's another Victorian Baptist agency which wished to publish a celebratory history. And it urged its commission writers to prepare what they call the warts and all narrative. But when this Cromwellian dictum was duly followed, the manuscript was replaced with a glossy public relations publication. The forgotten part needed to be told and remembered, not forgotten. You see how I'm jumping around between this difficulty of remembering and forgetting. Now we're grateful that we have been able to remember a good deal of the college's history. We remember stimulating classes and exciting discoveries. How easily we forgot seemingly endless and boring lectures. We've been to many tedious meetings and occasionally significant decisions were taken. We do remember inspiring generosity from the Baptists of this state and beyond for that matter. But we also wince a little as we recall undeserved criticisms. All part of the story of 125 years. I remember the Apostle Paul declared, you know, that he remembered, he wanted to forget rather, those things which were behind. And yet, of course, he hadn't forgotten. He's writing to the Philippians and he's just been telling them about his Jewish heritage and this, that and the other that happened to him. But he wanted to forget those things which were laid behind in the sense of allowing them to determine his present status and ministry. He wanted to strain forward to what lies ahead. So we do, I would venture to suggest, as a college community. We want to strain forward to what lies ahead in challenging, difficult days. We can't forget what has happened. We can ensure that we don't allow it to hurt us and to distort what we're seeking to do. There is a balance, I'm suggesting you'll gather, between forgetting and remembering. Why do we want to realise and affirm the role of Whitley in Baptist life? We don't want to ignore the failures and the tensions, but, as Anna Clark has said in her book Every Now and Then, the story of our lives needs to be told and retold so we can place our story into a longer, multi-generational narrative of belonging. This narrative can shape our consciousness of who we are and where we belong, even within that little tiny slice of history that we share as a college and a union. How does a college construct its narrative of belonging? To whom do we belong? How do we belong? How is that belonging to be guarded and expressed? Well, now I come to Whitley and its history. My very simple suggestion is, and I won't have time to develop this, that Whitley the man offers a very interesting template of what the college has been or has tried to be, and Ross has brought out some of this already. What he hoped for the college, what his vision was. And it offers, I think, a convenient way of outlining at least the headings or the ways in which the symbiosis has evolved. Whitley, as Ross has said, was a gentle, careful scholar, a quiet teacher, never a powerful preacher. One honest referee wrote to the college, "Originality, force and fire would be too much to expect amid such other gifts." He was hailed by locals as the right man at the right place, though I think we might question whether it was exactly the right time. The college was a boom project, as Ross has shown you, established after an extraordinarily generous giving. Silas Harding, the anonymous giver we know now, was a grazier, a very difficult, cantankerous guy who lived in Geelong. That explains it, but Silas Harding was the man who gave and inspired others to give. And the college did, generously, as Ross has said. But, it was not the Baptist Union, but the Victorian Baptist Fund who controlled the money, and it was hard-headed business types, trustees, most of whom didn't know the theological college should be or might be, and it was they who took the decision that Whitley should go. Someone, a couple of years after that had happened, said that the college had been ring-barked by bureaucrats. The Baptist Union, however, was intimately involved, and Whitley provided a model of what might be done. And we've heard about his elevation of academic standards, his insistence that there should be practical courses, his willingness to share with other traditions, and he hoped that Baptists from other colonies would come to Melbourne, which they did, and his opening up of theological study. Can you see the way in which, in his own age and his own way, he offers as a kind of a template of what happened, and the ways in which the college has tried to continue. And that template, as far as theological education goes, continues to serve us well. But there were dramas along the way, and we've heard about that acts of bureaucratic control that ring-barked the college to the contemporary, as I said. Now, what has Whitley contributed? Well, to the college, to the union, I mean. Just to list, and this could be tiresome, so I won't do it, but one could easily list significant leaders who have come through the life of the college and have had enormous ministry impact. I guess we tend to think of the principals of the earlier days and lecturers. Donovan Mitchell regarded it, as he said at the time, it constituted a kind of mental apocalypse about what the Baptist Church was really like, his own traumas. We don't want to forget that story because it's a part of it. But we do want to remember that other people like the tutors we've mentioned, not only F.J. Wilker, but Eric Burley, Basil Brown, Doc Watson, and leaders that the college has produced. J.H. Cope, J.N.U., F.W. Lord, Jeffrey Blackburn came to this school, how many years? Decades. And of course, much more. Howard Craig, Tom King, it becomes very subjective who you name. But if you think back and look across the history, you will see the contribution the college has made. Not only the pastors, but missionaries and the rest of it. The whirlwind coming of David Mervyn Embry in 1959, that of course very much fits in with Whitley's vision of what the college might be. Again, when the churches gave so generously and willingly and happily, and we are grateful for that. A succession of pastors and scholars. You can name your own, but we've had a remarkable succession for which we are grateful. I'm thinking of, well, we saw Peter Stockman, but you could name many of his contemporaries, Ron Ham, David Griffiths, some who are in our midst, gladly, I would be embarrassed to name, but in terms of scholarship, well, Whitley can be, I think, in a very humble way, proud of people like, well, Garrett, Terry Fallon, Bruce Rumbold, Peter Broughton, Ross Langmead, Keith Dyer, and Frank Rees, and notable women like Meryl, who's been named, and Jill, and Marita, and Miwan, and many others too. It's a ridiculously subjective list, but I've named a few just to remind you of the way in which the college has contributed in that sense to our denomination here. You know, Whitley didn't only lead the college, he was editor of the denominational paper. He led in that capacity in sensitive theological discussion. There was a very popular movement, which Chapman was a leading figure, called the so-called higher life movement. Whitley wanted to ask, what is the lower Christian life? And he gently attacked a movement which was very popular. He did that all through his denominational. He was a deacon of his local church. He was an honorary pastor of Armada. He went around and visited the home mission churches. He had become what his good friend from Rawdon days, F.E. Harry, called a factotum for the denomination. Did everything it seemingly seemed. And when he was obliged to leave, Harry thought that was a bit unkind to penalise him for doing so many jobs so well. Whitley's contribution to the BUV has been replicated, I might suggest, in numerous denominational posts that Whitley staff and students have fulfilled. Many have been presidents of the union. Remember those? We used to have those once upon a time. Or engaged in strategic leadership and so on. Moreover, Whitley was deeply committed to global mission. He was the first secretary of the Victorian Baptist Foreign Mission. He visited India in 1895 together with Silas Mead from South Australia, and their visit shaped a good deal of mission policy. He represented the Victorian Mission in 1910 at the Edinburgh Missionary Conference. He promoted federalism, as we've been reminded, not only for the colonies, but for the Baptist missionary societies around Australia, and indeed the state unions. Global missionaries, union, national leaders, yes, Whitley can put his hand up and say, might we present these who have made these contributions? I'm thinking of people like J.H. Goebel, George Rees, Howard Crago, Geoffrey Blackburn, Kingsley Smith, Windmill, all leadership at a national level, and again, it's insidious to name some. Global missionaries, the death of Ron Potter in India in 1944 left a deep mark on the college, but it was, of course, along with the fellow missionaries who died, a catalyst for a great wave of new devotees to serving global mission. One could go on. Lorraine Barber, Adrian Neville, Frank Marsh, J.D. Williams, Trevor Farlow, Jeff Bright, Charles Olsen, Howard Wilkins, who's behind Lindsay Smith, and I could go on. A contribution, yes, part of what the college has given in that way. Also, we think of the establishment of the School of World Mission, partnership with World Vision, numerous students and non-English speaking backgrounds. And Marita's spoken about the Chinese students who were here after the Tiananmen Square massacre. It created one or two problems, like the student who said, I think it was to Athol, excuse me, Professor, who is this Paul you keep talking about all the time? There were some learning difficulties, but what some people said, oh, you can't do that kind of thing. It's a theological college for ministers. Well, Athol said, well, I thought we were supposed to be about missionaries. Weren't we supposed to be engaging in mission? Here they are! It happened. Well, there you go. Baptist World Body has also been, Whitley was involved in that, you know. His brother-in-law was J.H. Shakespeare, who helped organise the first BWE gathering in London in 1905, and he whistled up Whitley, who became virtually the organiser of it, and imitator, this, that and the other thing. And we might say, Whitley has made a significant contribution to Baptist World Alliance. People like Mervyn, but also Jeff Blackburn, the Vice President of the Union, Athol, Frank Rees and others of us who've tried to serve. Now, I'm saying what? We recall and honour these, we remember those, we want to not forget for a moment these positive and invaluable contributions, and we do so with all due humility. We know, like every other college, I remember the old Prof Morling, my first college principal, used to always tell every year they were the best year yet. But I remember how dismayed he would be. He'd say occasionally, you know, he failed. And we're all these. He failed in the ministry. And we don't pretend that there haven't been failures for which we might in part be responsible. But there were times in the colleges and times of financial independence which we had, we acted independently perhaps in ways that weren't altogether helpful for our churches. It's a two-way thing. We don't pretend that the college has always been all that it might have been. We've heard some of those difficult times recalled. But I'm suggesting we perhaps should move on. We need to forget some of those things on both sides. Be grateful for the good things, the great things we might be tempted to say. Because after all, the college is not an institution, it's not bricks and mortar, it's people like you and me, so frail, so prone in many ways to do wrong. It's a recurring danger for all theological colleges. Academic excellence can be divorced from authentic spirituality and isolated from the mission of the local church. It can and has happened. Similarly, the Baptist Union is not a bricks and mortar. It's churches, it's people. And how much this college is dependent on what we might say, in a bad choice of word, ordinary lay leaders, who've given inspiring commitment, leadership. I'm thinking of people like J. Newman and John Hopkins and Bernard Tutt and Brian Spicer and Keith Farrer and Ian Root and all went out. Again, it's invidious to select names. And if we acknowledge that those in the college have significant responsibilities, as we believe we do, we also recognise and affirm that those in denominational leadership also have heavy responsibilities. I wouldn't want to be answerable directly to some of the people they are called upon to be answerable to, because they can be succoured and supported by so many good people, but there are also ignorant and mischievous people out there who like nothing better than creating difficulties. Yes, we need each other. We do need to be in symbiosis. But above all, you know, if we didn't forget things, we'd all go mad, wouldn't we? And perhaps an unlikely source, Nietzsche once said, without forgetting it's quite impossible to live at all. Well, we want to move forward. We're grateful for the illumination that history and remembering give us. But let's ensure that our history is employed for harmony and not dissension, for reconciliation and not rancour, to affirm that faith, love and hope should always be a hallmark of all those who follow Jesus Christ, and justitium indeed.